Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's webinar, where we have an exciting topic waiting for you. But before we leave it over to our great presenters, I just wanted to run through a couple of housekeeping items with you. And that is, you're looking at the console in front of you, and on the left-hand side, you will see the Q&A box where you can type in your question at any time during this webinar, and we will do our best to answer the questions at the end during the Q&A session. On the right-hand side, you'll see our presenters today and their biographies. Feel free to check through. And then to ask you before you leave the webinar today, on the lower part of your screen, you'll see a blue box, which is linked to our very quick survey, just 2 questions. We invite you to fill that out and give us feedback. So without further ado, I will leave it over to Yves Boudreau and today's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot, and welcome everybody. We've been planning this one for quite some time here. You'll hear from 3 great presenters today, from Edge Gravity by Ericsson, which operates the UDN network, from Haste, our gaming acceleration partner, and also from our research partner, Zigzag Research, to present to you how we believe operators can gain a competitive edge in gaming. As you know, online gaming is a big business, bigger than I would have ever thought. Every time I look at my monthly credit card statement, I wonder where all my money is going, and I know it's going to online games for my kids. But I think I've learned a lot through this process about how this is not just about kids. This is really a new wave of entertainment business that has taken the world by storm and continues to grow exponentially week over week, month over month. And so we decided to commission a consumer survey earlier this year, which Bailey will tell you about. And we're looking forward to sharing with you what we learned. But first, I'd like to give the floor to Sanjeeb Guatakurta from the Edge Gravity team, who will introduce himself and give you a little bit of background on the UDN network. And then we'll pass it off to Adam and Bailey, who will take us on through there. Take it away, Sanjeeb.
Hey, thanks, Yves. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sanjeeb Guha. I'm the product manager for UDN Edge platform at Edge Gravity. Just a quick note on the word Edge Gravity. So this is, many of you would probably know us by Ericsson UDN. So Edge Gravity is just a rebranding effort we went through a couple of weeks ago. So everything is still the same. It's just the name of the organization has changed from UDN to Edge Gravity. It's still by Ericsson. Everything else remains the same. As you may know, at UDN, we are a provider of CDN services. And so we were invited to do a keynote in May in New York City, and our general manager Marcus made this provocative statement that CDN is dead, right? And long live the edge. I think the point that he was making is that given the economics of CDN, that CDN as an application is still interesting and alive, but then for it to survive and thrive in the upcoming years, what we have to do is essentially, look at it as an edge platform, as an edge application, and the infrastructure that supports it. The cost of that needs to be spread over across multiple applications, not just CDN, right? So this is a part of the reason also why we did the rebranding. So our focus now is really on the Edge platform, and that's what we are building. Okay. So what is the UDN delivery network? So this is essentially our rendition or our delivery of the UDN Edge platform, right? And this is being built in partnership with operators and service providers, and it's really to deliver the next generation of edge scale applications. And you will hear one such example in Haste coming up in the next few minutes. So this is an edge platform that is built with in collaboration with service providers. We have 80 of them who have joined us in this journey, and we look forward to having more. Along with the 80 service providers in which we'll have edge presence, we have also built our own UDN core sites, in fact 22 of them, and they are in these following cities. As you can see, they are spread across North America, Europe, and Asia. And in each of these sites, we have good branded hardware like servers and network infrastructure and the like. They're all interconnected with private MPLS links. We are going to be operating, using modern software like OpenStack and Kubernetes and SaltStack for automation and all that. So it's a very modern infrastructure that has been built from the ground up, all for the delivery of edge applications. So what are we building? So essentially, you can think of it as three things, right? So first is we're building an ecosystem that comprises of not only application providers who will bring these interesting edge applications, but also in the infrastructure layer, right? So whether it's partnerships with folks like who are providing us with the OpenStack infrastructure, or with the innovative hardware and stuff like that, and also our partners in the ecosystem like Equinix and all that. So that's one part, the ecosystem. The second thing we are doing is we're building an edge cloud platform, obviously, to power the next generation of applications, right, to deliver the edge applications. And the third thing is that these platforms, right, are coming from a variety of verticals, right? And one of them we'll be discussing today, the gaming acceleration, but there are many others that we are talking with, and I'll talk about a few of them in the upcoming slide. So in terms of our beliefs, right? So as we are building this, what is it that we fundamentally believe in, right? So we fundamentally believe that the next wave of the internet will not be able to scale without the active participation of service providers. Meaning, this next generation of applications that are coming up, right? They cannot all be deployed in the centralized clouds. They require a distributed infrastructure, and by definition, you will need the active participation of service providers for those applications to actually come into being, right? Furthermore, that because of the distributed nature of this thing, these application providers, will not be able to handle both the business relationships as well as the technical relationship with this multitude of the service providers. Therefore, an intermediary like Edge Gravity is very important in this equation, right? To provide the application providers with a platform, right, which handles the diversity of the individual clouds below that, right? And then, and although we started off with content delivery as CDN, right? That, as I said, that to us was the first great application and the proof point for Edge, but CDN by itself is just a means to an end and not an end unto itself. So the North Stars, the high-level vision point that guide us is again the fact that we are building a cloud business. And it's important to understand that we're not trying to replace the public clouds. We view public cloud as an important complement to what we're doing, and we are not we're not replacing them, but we do think that we are building a new business that is at the edge, and it's a new segment of the cloud business, right? Second thing is we are focusing on the platform itself. That is to say, the platform on which the applications will be deployed and will be scaled and run, right? We are not focusing on the applications that run on those platforms. For that, we'll be partnering with those application providers, and we're looking to work with them and partner with them along with our operators, right, to scale and deploy those applications. So, this whole edge thing is very new. So we don't pretend to know all the answers to what the various requirements are because the applications are varied. So we have been incubating and looking for applications. We've been talking to a lot of people, and the kind of applications that we are looking for is, number one, that generally run in the public cloud today. That is to say that it's already been proven that they can run in a modern runtime, and because that's the kind of a runtime that we are providing. Secondly, they have these edge characteristics, or they have low latency requirements or high bandwidth, so those applications kind of fit the edge mold, right? And then the other thing is that we're also looking, for applications that that are enabled by the edge, right? So in other words, and you'll see this with Haste, right? So there are applications that that would not run well in a centralized cloud environment, but would actually benefit from running in a distributed cloud environment like the one being provided by UDN's edge platform. So as I was mentioning, we have spoken to a lot of companies and application providers, again, to build out the ecosystem, to get an understanding of what the requirements are, what they mean by edge, and this also informs our, how we build a platform so that, we cater to the requirements of these applications, right? We have spoken with a lot, and we continue to speak with them on a daily basis, right? We are very encouraged by the reception that we have received, right? And that's very encouraging to us. So among the many that we have spoken to, the first wave of incubation, if you will, that we have undertaken are these four applications or organization, that I have highlighted over here. So I won't have time to get into the details of each one of them, but Haste is a gaming acceleration service, and you're going to hear from Adam very shortly on Haste. Mode provides an SD-WAN service. Essentially, they're using the edge to provide, an SD-WAN service which provides the reliability of MPLS at the price point of business internet, right? Packet Zoom, which has now been acquired, but essentially is in the business of providing acceleration service for the mobile last mile, and Net Insight provides a video on demand and live synchronization services. Okay. So this is my last slide. The key takeaway is that UDN, the Unified Delivery Network, is a live global network, and as I mentioned, it operates in 22 core locations that are operated by us, along with 80+ service providers of the edge. Right? We started off with content delivery. We think it's a great edge application, but it is a application among many. Right? And we are, as you just saw, we are incubating, the next wave of edge applications. We have selected a few. We are continuing to work this process and get more into the pipeline. And we still believe in the shared CDN business model, which is a unique business model for delivering CDN services to service providers who own content for delivery to their subscribers. Right? So these are the main points. So I think with this, I'm going to turn it over back to Eve. Eve?
Thanks, Sanjeev. That was great. I think we're going to head to a poll question now real quick. So for the audience here, for applications like online gaming that require low latency, do you guys think that offering these at the edge is critical to the experience, important but not essential, or is this not important at all? How important is the edge for online gaming and low latency services, if you guys want to submit your answers there? We see that we have a few folks that are having some challenges with the resizing, I guess, of the windows themselves, but we will send the PDF files to you guys after this along with the replay. So don't worry, we'll definitely circulate this information. We want to make sure that it got to as many people as possible, and we're also happy to do some follow-up sessions. I see a lot of service providers that did join today, so thank you. You were the target audience for this to see how you can participate actively in here. So if you do want to set up a separate session, if you're running out of time or if you think somebody else needs to see this presentation a little more customized to you, we can certainly follow up and send that along afterwards and set up some time. Is that enough time for the poll, Elliot?
It is.
Okay. So now if we go to the poll results, I guess, this is how it works. Okay, so we were hoping this would be the answer. We didn't want to be too presumptuous on it, but we do think that this is a great edge application, and I will not waste any more time and get into introducing Adam Toll, one of the co-founders of Haste, to talk to you about the Haste gaming acceleration technology. Take it away, Adam.
Thanks, Eve. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Adam Toll. I'm a co-founder of Haste, and I'm going to very briefly walk you through what we are doing with Edge Gravity today and how we are starting to work with service providers to power a gaming tier of service. But I just want to start by saying that the reason that we felt that this was the right partnership for us on the infrastructure side is because of the unique approach and architecture of the UDN, both in terms of its very powerful global backbone, but really critically in its partnership with service providers all over the world. And I think as I just walk through what we're doing, I think that maybe that will become a little clearer to everybody. So fundamentally, Haste is network software that optimizes the internet for people who are engaged in real-time interactive experiences. And what that means from a practical point of view today in terms of our business and our focus is that Haste is optimizing connections between gamers and game servers as they play in, particularly in competitive multiplayer online video games. This is a huge market. I'm sure that many of you are familiar, and I'm not going to walk through this whole slide, but I will just highlight for you that gamers are older than you think they are. The average age of a gamer is, consistently falls between 30 and 35 years of age from survey to survey. Gamers are employed at higher rates than the average internet user. They have higher salaries, higher incomes than the average internet user, and they spend an enormous amount of money on their hobby. Thinking about it from a household point of view, in the U.S., there's a very high penetration of gamers in households, and they are approaching 2 gamers per household in those households. So again, this is a huge and mainstream activity, and I'm sure the people on the call are generally aware that really this is emerging into a whole new category of media, along with film and television and music and so forth. The problem is, of course, is that the internet wasn't really designed for these types of real-time experiences. These games are obviously populated by people who are really competitive. But the other thing to really understand about gaming, when I was growing up, gaming was something that maybe kids were doing in mom's basement. You were disconnected. Today, gaming really should be thought of more like social networking, where people are curating an identity that is indelible. So in these games, your public ranking and status are constantly changing based on your success in these games. You can think of it like a ball player, where every strike, every hit, every RBI contributes to your career-long statistics. There's something similar going on here. So for success, people really need a stable two-way connection. This is happening across the internet, right? So I just want to pause and make the point that when we think about content delivery, where the content is pre-existing and static, right, like an app or a movie or a song, those lend themselves to a traditional CDN solution. The problem here is that the content that needs to be optimized is user-generated in real time, and the need for optimization is two-way or multi-way. And so a new solution is required, and this is what Haste has built. The other thing that I'll say about lag, again, for those of you who are less familiar with the space, lag is as this audience would know, is really composed of latency and jitter and packet loss. Latency gets a lot of attention. It's important to have a good latency, but the stability of the connection as measured by jitter and packet loss is just as critical. And in fact, active players will tell you that they would rather have a somewhat higher latency if it is very stable and predictable, rather than a connection which has an average latency that is much lower, but which jumps around unpredictably. In other words, high jitter and storms of packet loss. And this is because it really reduces their competitiveness in the game. Timing and group coordination are critical, and jitter and packet loss really throw those things off. And finally, the point I'll just make here is that individual ISPs alone can't fix the problem. Obviously, there's a lot that a service provider can do to just optimize their own network, to be smart about peering arrangements. We know that some folks are, doing that, for example, to ensure that downloads from the Steam platform happen smoothly. And those are all good and smart things to be doing. But in the end, this gameplay is transiting multiple domains. And when that traffic leaves your domain, you can't control it. So what Haste has built can really be thought of in three layers. There is the network layer, where there are Haste nodes running our software that are positioned near clusters of game servers. They are positioned for good access to the eyeball networks, not unlike a CDN in that case. And there are nodes in other strategic places on the internet, critical data exchange points and so forth. The next layer here in the middle is really our suite of software-defined networking software that is really at the core of what we have developed. And I won't go into details here, but other than just to say that some of the key aspects of our platform are that we have implemented a full-blown multipath solution where game data is, gameplay data is duplicated and sent on multiple disparate routes, which are then summed on either side of that transaction, meaning we are not switching between routes based on which is performing best. We are actually summing all of the routes and accepting all packets from all routes, taking whichever packets come first from whichever routes, putting them back in order, and handing them off locally either to the game server or the game software running on the player's computer. Again, reminding everybody that this is happening in both directions. We have our own quasi-protocol that we wrap packets up into for transport, and there are a number of other things that we are doing, patented technology that, of course, we're happy to get into in follow-up conversations. The third layer, the third aspect of the Haste platform today is a very small piece of software that players install on their game machine, and that does two things. It really turns their game machine into a node on the Haste network for the duration of gameplay, and it also provides some player engagement. There are some tools for people to test their network connection to specific game servers before they commit to a match. We tell people about their connections after a match. We can communicate with people and so forth. And so to kind of bring that all together, today's application architecture with the UDN, starting from the right-hand side, we have a PC running a Haste client. That is then connecting into a broadband service provider, and in this diagram, we are showing a Haste node running on a edge gravity edge node that is on the service provider's local network. That is then passed to the internet where the in the cloud part of the diagram, you see 4 different colored paths. These are representing 4 different, completely different paths through the internet that are bouncing around through different Haste nodes on their way to the game server. To be clear, we are in control of all of those packets, every step between the player and the game server and back again. So we have full visibility even though we are transiting domains. So this is an overlay network in which we have real-time visibility into everything happening in every pathway between every player and every game server. It is, in summary, a fire hose of real-time data about exactly what's happening on the internet. And then finally, just to give you all a little bit of a peek into the future, in phase 2, we are moving the Haste technology into the service provider network, which means that devices that are where it's more difficult to install our software can be supported through the home network. So that adds consoles and tethered mobile devices through home Wi-Fi. And in our 3rd phase, we are adding, when working with mobile service providers, mobile over-the-air full acceleration as well. So happy to follow up with anybody who'd like to. And Eve, I'll toss it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Adam. If you guys don't know how to ask questions, look around the screen there. I don't see the user view itself, but you should see the ability to ask some questions here. We've got a few that are lined up already for the end, and we'll take most of those questions at the end of the session, and also happy to answer any questions that you guys have by email and reaching out through us after the webcast. So a little bit about the background on Zigzag Research, a company here that we found fortuitously that was quite helpful in terms of helping us understand how to put this survey together. And one thing I want to make sure that everybody knows here is that we're putting this information out there for people to learn. So this is in full transparency, which ironically for marketing purposes, typically people present the data that's good for them. But I learned a lot personally about this market, which I was not aware of before. And there's a lot of other data and insights that we just could not put into this slide deck. So please, if you do have any specific questions or things that you think that we can learn from the data that we've compiled here, do reach out to us, and we're happy to go and mine additional data here as well. So again, this slide deck was put together specifically to answer some hypotheses, which Bailey will take you through. So I'd like to introduce Bailey, CEO of Zigzag Research, to take you through what we found.
Fabulous. Thank you, Eve. Again, my name is Bailey Allen. I am with Zigzag Research. And to tell you a little bit about Zigzag, we are a marketing research firm. We use insights and strategy consulting to help brands determine their next steps, whether it's a new product or service offering, a solution, pricing strategy, understanding what their customers have to say, or all of these things combined. But anyway, enough about that. So it's exciting to be here today to present the results of the Gamer Insights research we recently conducted. And I'm going to just kind of dig right in. So we're going to be starting with spending a moment to discuss the main objective of the study. So you're going to see that the internet wasn't designed for real time. You know, network instability and lag increase the likelihood of a poor gaming outcome, which essentially leads to frustration with gameplay. So with new technology ever available, do gamers desire a more stable connection? And if so, are they willing to pay for it? So the ultimate goal was to determine whether gamers are not only ready, but if they're willing to pay for an internet connection which offers less or no lag. And we discovered that yes, ultimately they're willing to pay to play with less lag. And we'll touch on associated pricing and such as we delve into the findings further. We also had a number of objectives interwoven into the research, such as primary frustrations experienced when playing, high and low moments in the gaming experience, as well as more practical items around metrics, which are associated more with peak performance, and we'll explore that more deeply as well. So we're going to get into the main and the sub-objectives as we go through the reporting today. Now let's spend a moment and discuss what's called a sampling frame. So we invited 1,000 individuals in the U.S. and 500 from Canada to participate in an online survey. The survey lasted approximately 16.4 minutes. on average, and the criteria focused on age, like the gaming habits in terms of hours of play per week. And gender and ethnicity were considered soft quotas, meaning we accepted responses as they fell. And we also completed one-on-ones with 8 respondents. 2 from each player segment were selected for a 15-minute in-depth follow-up interview after the quantitative results were compiled. What we really wanted to do was just provide additional context to the findings. So you will see as we go through some of these remarks from these one-on-ones in quotes throughout the report. And then in terms of advanced analytics, we used a couple of different strategies. One is we used a technique which heavily relies on open-ended data around the ebbs and flows associated with the gaming journey itself. This allows the analyst a window into the moments that matter, if you will, most to the participant around the item of study, in this case gaming, to derive the most intense points and gaming at its low points. Simply, this analysis just provides us with more context around the in-the-moment experience. We also conducted a pricing sensitivity test using the Van Westendorp pricing sensitivity meter. This is actually a marketing technique which determines consumer, or in this case, and gamer price preference, especially among the items that might be newer to market. Now, Adam touched upon demographics from the Haste research, and our demographics actually closely mirrored the findings found there. We see that we have males with a fairly diverse income, age was 32 on average, with quite an eclectic educational background. 2/3 are employed full-time, with another 1/4 working part-time currently. Now, here are the 4 gamer types that were determined. In order to see distinctions between the groups, we classified 4 segments based on the hours of gameplay. These are coined casual gamers, eager gamers, enthusiastic gamers, and avid gamers. And casual and eager gamers tended to be trend slightly older, while enthusiastic and avid gamers skewed a slight bit younger. Okay, we'll spend a couple of minutes just orienting ourselves with the time spent gaming along with the devices that are utilized for gameplay. So here we actually see that we ask gamers to consider how many hours they spend gaming across a 1-week time span. We determined gamers spend an average of 12 hours per week playing. The majority of time is spent at home. The more avid gamers do tend to admit playing more frequently outside of the home, such as at work or at school. The other category that you see listed at the bottom tends to apply more to while in transit, such as on a train or a passenger in a car. We also ask gamers to recall the number of hours they spent gaming across various devices, such as mobile device, gaming PC, console, or the like. And overall, we actually see a fairly even distribution on a mobile device, and those who utilize are more likely to use gaming consoles, while avid gamers tend to lean more towards an actual gaming PC. We actually found here, too, that tablets are just evidently not a very prime source for gaming. Okay, so now we're going to get into looking really at the customer journey from the standpoint of peaks and valleys. At first glance, you're actually going to take a look here and probably think, this looks incredibly simple, doesn't really matter much, but I'm going to just spend a moment giving a little bit of background here. So I want you guys to just think about, can you remember everything you might have done last Wednesday? And I'm not talking like 1 or 2 things. I mean like the whole Wednesday. And the chances are you don't. Like if you remember anything about last Wednesday, it will probably be something that significantly affected your day. It might be, getting into an argument with your spouse, or receiving a raise at work, or something like that. Maybe those types of things. But what you ate as a snack, or how many items you picked up at the dry cleaners are probably details that have likely vanished. And why? Why did those vanish? Well, it's simple. They just weren't very important to you. As humans, emotions create strong memories or attachments to pretty much anything. So by using open-ended text responses, we converted qualitative text to quantifiable information, where we could then analyze the overall impact and discern those larger moments that matter in the life of a gaming experience, as we discussed above. So, in the higher peaks, we see that gaming provides an exciting time, but there's kind of a tension that skews positive around stress. Maybe it's the competitive nature of the gaming environment or those types of things, But what we do see, and we did find that out in the one-on-ones as well, that competitive piece is certainly an element. Gaming is meant to relax, but at the same time does provide that positive tension. But predominantly, we see that gaming is meant, to relax, provide an exciting time. The tension is not so much that players like to win. They can get a bit stressed, but the stress does not deter from the positive experience. But being slow to load, experiencing lag, and our players or playing with gamers who are using cheats or try to cheat their way into the system seems to get people, a little bit antsy. So those moments, the memories that really, I'm going to go back for 1 second here and go back to Wednesday. So if you did eat an apple with a worm in it, or rather half a worm, right? You would probably remember. So that memory would be really important to you so that you wouldn't eat an apple with worms in it again. Similarly, if you might have picked up your dry cleaning and there were no incidents, you probably wouldn't remember the details. But if the cleaners ruined your favorite shirt, you might experience a very sharp emotion, right? It might be outrage or frustration or disappointment or maybe all three, and then that's the way you would recall that experience. So here, again, we just want to look at these moments that negatively imprint against those that positively imprint and try to find a correlation. And what this tells us essentially is that even when asked indirectly, lag is a common frustration. So based on the information we see here, addressing lag would enhance the gaming experience and probably provide more desirable emotional outcome for the gamer. Everyone has seen a word cloud, right? So this slide really just kind of provides a bit more context into the peak experiences and just kind of one-word snippets. And conversely, this slide identifies the words that are more identified as frustrating throughout the gaming experience. And while price played a factor, time, lag, and connectivity issues were extremely more prevalent. And so to further we conducted a mini-max diff analysis where players were asked to view a series of screens with 8 attributes ranging from online lag and game freezing, dying and having to start over, to gamer stereotypes and finding the time. So for those who may not know, a max diff exercise allows players to basically perform a trade-off task where they select which item is most frustrating and which is least frustrating through a series of questions. And so what we did determine, which is very much in keeping with the open-ended journey that we just discussed, is that essentially online lag and game freezing were items that kind of were the most common frustrations, while items or lesser issues, still issues nonetheless, were more gamer stereotypes. And that was defined as other communities, even TV shows and movies, which depict gamers as being, kind of a stereotypical nerdy type and such, as well as just trying to find the time, which I think is fairly self-explanatory. Now, a little bit more on lag. So just to follow up on the experience, gamers were actually asked, if they had ever thought about or actually called to complain about lag. And if they have, who do they contact? So among those who have communicated their frustrations, over half, or 53%, have reached out to their internet service provider or ISP directly. Now, another 22% have reached out to both the gaming manufacturer and the ISP for assistance, which means that the ISP is involved in these types of communications an overwhelming 75% of the time, so suggesting that they are the go-to source for assistance in this area. Now, we're going to spend a bit of time discussing metrics gamers tend to measure. So those who are enthusiastic or avid gamers who tend to use the PC generally measure their ping much more so than jitter or packet loss. Most would like to see these metrics that they do measure cut in half and would consider that an improvement over their current gaming situation. And across the U.S. And Canada, 41% are likely to experience lag nearly every time they play. It seems that players just kind of accept it as a reality of their gaming situation. If you look to the left side of the screen at the bottom, we have a comment by a male who's an avid gamer who stated, in his opinion, that lag is something that has simply become a way of life. It would be almost laughable if it weren't so annoying, which I think sums up the sentiment among most of the gamers. Now, when asked to describe what causes lag, again, this was in an open-ended format, responses ranged anywhere from the game you're playing, with the fewest number of answers, to a poor internet connection or system overload. We also asked questions around what games individuals might have experience more lag in. We found that Fortnite, Battlefront 2, and FIFA tended to be those larger mentions, while other active dual player games tended to rate up there as well. This could be a function of just what people are playing currently, or it could simply be, and that would be an issue that we might want to delve into in future research. Now, this is really interesting. We're going to explore the information around the Haste solution and the associated pricing. So gamers tend to spend around $78.67 per month, with the price rising by the time spent in play. Canadians tended to spend slightly less. Now, if you look here, all the information that's presented in terms of dollars within this report has actually been converted from Canadian to U.S. dollars just for frame of reference. Now, gamers were then asked to review the Haste solution by imagining an application that they can install on their machine that allows for better internet, no single point of failure, with real-time optimization to ensure a constant connection. After installation, the software simply sits in the background and optimizes game performance, and will even provide an analysis of their last game's network performance and show items such as ping, packet loss, and jitter for the previous game. Now, upon review and consideration, collectively over half are interested in the concept, with slightly more in the United States, approximately 60%, expressing interest in those in Canada, though nearly half of Canadians are interested at 48%. Now, as we discussed briefly in the intro, a pricing sensitivity analysis was performed. A variety of ways of conducting price sensitivity. We landed on Van Westendorp. Gamers were asked 4 price-related questions after they gauged their overall interest in the solution. They were asked essentially at what price would they consider the solution so cheap that it is so inexpensive that they would almost doubt the quality. They were also asked at what price they would consider the solution to be a bargain, and then at what price would the solution start getting expensive, and finally, at what price would they consider the solution too expensive to actually consider purchasing. So with this feedback and a large enough sample, which we have here, we can actually make some inferences about what a reasonable range of pricing might be. So the price at which people would consider the product cheap, then consider it a bargain, defines what we call the low end of reasonable prices. And any cheaper in the price would turn off more gamers than attract them to that good price. Now, the price at which gamers would consider the product too expensive than just getting expensive defines the higher end of the spectrum, so the higher end of reasonable prices. So any more expensive, and then the gamers would stop considering it and might consider, and then they would still consider buying it at the more expensive price. And essentially what we found here is that in the United States, gamers suggested the acceptable range for the Haste solution would fall somewhere between $10 and $24.75 per month as the acceptable price range, while the optimal price range sits at about $18.50. Now, again, we converted Canadian dollars to U.S. for frame of reference and for ease of comparison. And we saw that Canadian gamers suggested the acceptable range for the Haste solution to fall somewhere more in line with $8 and $20 per month as that acceptable price range, while the optimal price point sits at $15. Now, we previously discussed interest in the solution, which actually occurs in the orange bars on the left-hand side of the slide. The likelihood to desire purchase from an ISP is actually noted in blue underneath, which suggests that among those who are interested, that they would seek, most would actually seek out or look for this offering. Now, there's not a lot of differentiation on the right-hand side between annual and monthly payments, so slightly more would prefer a monthly subscription. I don't particularly find that surprising. It's very in keeping with the framework that most consumers, gamers, or otherwise would expect from their ISP. We also wanted to determine the average price for home internet or service each month, finding this to be slightly more in the U.S. than in Canada. This, again, was across a variety of package speeds. And so that's basically a wrap. I mean, clearly there's an appetite for the proposed solution to enhance the gaming experience, and there's common frustrations associated with gamers based on this research. Gamers are also willing to pay a price to enhance this performance, and we'll look to ISPs to bring this to fruition. Eve?
All righty, thanks, Bailey. Thank you so much. Okay, I see lots of questions here, so I'll start peeling through them. Feel free to type in your questions here as well. There's a question for you, Bailey, here, but I'll let you give it some thoughts. I'll ask it, but I won't ask you to answer right away. I'll actually move on to an easier question for Adam first. But the question for you, Bailey, is there anything in this particular presentation that or that's not in this presentation that you would highlight, maybe a 1, 2, or 3 kind of things that are not in this presentation yet that you think are worth mentioning to the audience? And also, is there any other data that you think or answers that we could get out of the data that wasn't in this presentation? But I'll let you give that a couple of seconds of thought and ask one of the questions here that's in the chat window. This one's for Adam. So Adam, are there any performance metrics that show the different gamer experiences using Haste versus not using Haste on the same network? So essentially, how do you guys measure the lift with and without the Haste acceleration service enabled?
That's a great question. So when we start working with a service provider, we use our beaconing technology, which is a sort of light footprint virtual servers that we can spin up inside of your environment. And then we can do a combination of synthetic and real-world tests. Typically, a service provider will actually have subscribers who are already users of Haste. So with a variety of platforms to measure with, we are then measuring latency and jitter and packet loss on and off the Haste platform. So using, for example, your users' existing your existing subscribers' actual experience, or by generating what are pretty much the same synthetic numbers using our platform. And then we also have a Haste score formula, which articulates the quality of connections, both the component elements of latency and jitter and packet loss, and an overall score that puts the quality of the connection in context on a sort of easy to use 0 to 100 basis. And those numbers are calculated using real-world experience, the real-world experience of gamers. So from a gamer's perspective, what amount of jitter is okay? At what point does jitter start to become a problem, and when does it render the game unplayable? Same thing with packet loss, same thing with latency. So not only are we providing on and off measures, but we're also able to deliver you context. What does this mean when someone is playing a game? Sorry, that was the end of my answer. And I'm happy to keep going.
It was. Thanks, Adam. Another one for you, Adam, and Bailey, let me know when you're ready. But how long will it be before there's broad adoption for this kind of technology globally, and which regions do you see the most, or do you anticipate, sorry, that will be kind of first to adopt something like this? That's for you, Adam. How long will it be for broad adoption globally, and which regions do you anticipate will be first? How long do you believe this will take for global adoption, and which regions do you anticipate will be first?
Yeah. So great question. So first of all, we have been working on Haste for a while now, and we have made it available in a freemium version to people all over the world. There are hundreds of thousands of people with Haste running all over the world. In terms of our partnership with Ericsson and the work that we're starting to do working with service providers, we're really focused at the moment on North America, Europe, and the Middle East. We are testing our network today in Asia and the rest of the world, and we'll be live in those areas very soon.
Okay, great. Bailey, going back to your question, anything that wasn't presented today that you think merits, kind of pointing a few things out here for the attendees?
Sure. It's a great question. So, there's some interesting things and tidbits that weren't included simply because they were interesting, but they were kind of ancillary. One was just around, missing daily activities. We heard from gamers that they will, tend to get distracted, or they will miss certain items. We know that they become so engrossed in the game that they're playing that they may miss common daily activities. Some mentioned missing sleep, have skipped a meal, missed a shower. It would be interesting to maybe delve into that a bit more, but those are just kind of, again, just interesting ancillary facts. Something that I felt like we potentially could enhance future research with would be really about watching online gaming or online sporting events or things of that nature. We know with growth of esports and online sites, especially like things like Twitch and others, gamers were asked, that they want to watch other gamers playing online. It'd be interesting to know how many of them also, maybe participate in other types of online games that would require or enhance their internet connectivity or speed. Also, just really potentially delving into security solutions, finding out how, concerned gamers be with online security, and delving in a bit more there. But those would potentially be areas to explore.
Okay, question for me then, since I'm definitely curious. Did you see any real differences between the notable differences between the Canadian data, since we have quite a few Canadian folks here online, and the U.S. data from a consumer standpoint, outside of the conversion of currency?
No, honestly, they were very similar. I mean, I do believe overall that there's an appetite in both markets. The U.S. market was a little bit more warmed up. Definitely the Canadian market was a little lukewarm if you consider 50% or 48% to be interested in a solution such as this. It's still an incredibly strong percentage. Everything tended to skew very similarly.
Okay, and Sanjeev and Adam, you guys are certainly welcome to ask some questions as well as I get ready for this next one here. The question is, I guess, for Adam here, which studios is Haste working with?
Oh, that's a great question, and maybe I should have said something about that. So we have very good relationships with all of the game companies, and we're starting to talk to them a little bit more deeply about how we can work together. But I just want to be clear that Haste technology actually does not require the participation of the application provider. We are an independent application that runs on a game device, and while we are application aware, meaning we can see that a game is running, we're really only touching things at the network level. And I think the best way to understand how that works is that the Haste servers that are adjacent to game servers are just that. We are co-located with game servers. We are typically in the same facility or otherwise have a vanishingly small distance to connect with them through the network, according to network topology. And so when Haste diverts the gameplay data, we're actually sending that data not directly to a game server, but to our co-located server. And that's where we're then reassembling the data from multiple paths and putting it back in order and doing all that stuff. And then we hand it off locally to the game server. The game server, when they're sending data back to the player, is actually sending that data to that same computer that is right there, which then relays it back through the network back to the player. And so in that way, we don't actually have to work with the game companies themselves. That said, we're very friendly with them. They know what we're doing, and we hope to be able to talk a little bit here before too long about other ways in which we're cooperating with them, because they recognize that we're helping to make the experience of their game better for their players. I hope that answers the question. Sorry, I guess the one other point that might be part of that question, you can go to haste.net and you can see the list of all the games that we support. And what you'll see is that we are supporting the overwhelmingly biggest, most popular games in the world. And that list of game titles continues to grow. It's actually fairly straightforward for us to add new titles. I actually am not sure whether this has been published or not yet, but I believe we are about to announce, another handful of titles on top of what you can see online right now. But you'll recognize all of the titles. It's all of the biggest. Hopefully that's sufficient. And if not, obviously I'm happy to get into this offline with anybody who's interested in understanding more.
Yeah, I'm going to roll up a few questions into some broader ones here. Of course, you can certainly reach us at info@edgegravity.ericsson.com. All this information and questions, they'll get back to us at Edge Gravity, Ericsson, and also to Haste and to Zigzag as well. Happy to schedule some follow-ups there. One, I guess, broad question that we typically would get here, Adam, which is, how many people have, downloaded this application from your beta tests, and is this a service that's commercially available today? Like, is this a today thing, or is this kind of like come back?
Yes, it's a today, right now thing. Yep, it's a today, right now thing. People are using Haste all over the world. We have had about 600,000 people create and sign up for Haste. We see hundreds of thousands of active installations on a daily basis. But to be clear, while we have made Haste available, and you can go to haste.net today, and any individual can download it, and while there is actually a pro version that people can subscribe to for unlimited acceleration, what we're really interested in doing is working with service providers, because that's where we can work together to really power a full gaming tier of service in which we're cooperating with the service provider. And that helps deliver, in combination with the UDN platform, Edge Gravity, that helps deliver an even more superior service. And so, that's really been our focus. We don't do really any marketing or sales in that direct-to-consumer mode. Mostly it's great for us to have people with Haste running and installed, because we have been able to engineer for scale against that, and because we have an enormous amount of insight about network conditions, and performance, as I've made reference to in some of my previous comments. And those data feed back into our platform in this virtuous cycle of self-optimization that Haste is constantly doing automatically.
Okay. I think I'll take one more here, and then the rest I'll have to do offline, which I hope is okay with all of you. Does this apply better to specific last mile technologies, cable, fiber, or DSL? So it's really technology agnostic from that standpoint. You know, the last mile is, I wouldn't say less important than the rest of the internet, but you know, we've had some people that have gigabit services over cable come back and say that users have gotten, you know, significant 30 to 40% uplift on what you would think is a very high-speed connection, you know, right next to a game server. So, you know, there's the sets of data here that Edge Gravity and Haste do provide on a case-by-case basis to the operators that want to deploy the technology. We have a very good mechanism to show people what the estimates of uplift would be for your users, and give you a real idea. One of you know, the performance improvement that they would get. But one thing I did want to share with the audience here before we leave for the day is, you know, my hypothesis when starting this whole process is that people would not value this type of a service and would not necessarily pay for it, let alone pay their ISP to deliver this service. And I'm glad to say that I was wrong in that hypothesis. They've come out quite actively saying that they still have faith in their ISPs to do the right thing when it comes to this. And we'd love to have conversations with each of you going forward to figure out a way of how to create some packages here and make this technology available to your users so they can improve their online gaming experience and improve the value that they see in the relationship with their broadband service providers. Just lastly here, that we see the poll. I think you guys agree that the people are actively considering, let's say, launching this type of a service for their users. For those who aren't convinced, please let us know what you think are the gaps in this survey. We're happy to learn from you. We will probably do some additional countries for this survey in the future. I think that'll be driven by this audience as well as to where we should prioritize going to learn. We're expecting regional differences here and there. But thank you so much for joining today. You can always reach us at info@edgegravity.ericsson.com. And we'll have a great Thanksgiving if you're here in the U.S. And otherwise, have fun working on Thursday. We'll be off. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks.